Hey guys, I'm going to review the Arrtx Acrylic Markers. By the way, this video is not sponsored. I wish it was though. It was a birthday gift from my family, so I promised to be brutally honest. The box came with a thank you card from Arrtx, a sticker sheet to label the ends of the markers, and another sticker sheet for the sides or wherever you want to put it. The markers have a good size circumference. I mean, it fits my hand well. It's not bulky or big like other markers I've seen. I opened and closed this marker like 5 times because I wanted a good clip for this video, and some paint has already spilled out on the marker. After drawing with these, a lot of the markers ended up looking like this, but I was being careful when I was drawing. The website states that the order of the color card stickers is the same as how the markers are ordered in the box. They are talking about the small sticker sheet. I don't know why they did this, but the order of the larger label stickers is not the same as the smaller stickers or the placing of the markers. So minus points for leaving the labeling to us because the first sticker I placed did not go in the center, and this drove me freaking nuts. I thought I could remove and reposition it off camera, but I couldn't. Like, the sticker stays. Once it's put, it stays. Even though it is nice to bond with these markers, I prefer the markers already labeled. Placing just the small stickers took about 30 minutes, and if me doing this looks easy to you, just remember it's called editing. But the good thing about labeling these markers ourselves is the customization aspect of it, because I decided not to use these side stickers. I didn't think it made the markers look that aesthetic. I also don't need extra labels, like I can just read the top of the marker. On the website, you can download swatch sheets, and I'll include the links in the description, but I wanted smaller ones that fit inside the box so I can reference it whenever I use the markers, you know? Here are the dimensions if you want to do what I did, and after giving it 0.5 centimeter borders, I measured out 5 rows and 12 columns. While making the swatch sheets, I noticed that some markers were super juicy and most were kind of dry. It's kind of disappointing how much more dried markers are in this set than juicy ones. Definitely expected better. By looking at the swatch sheet, 31 out of 60 markers were on the dry end. It's hard to tell on camera, and it's not a big deal because I just have to layer it a couple times, but I did not expect this. Erasing the dried paint doesn't really take off much of the paint at all. The eraser shavings did have some color to them, so technically some color came off, but it's not enough to notice. Even though the stickers don't match the swatch sheet, surprisingly the cap color does. So here are some examples of exact matches and the ones that are a couple shades off. On the Arrtx website, it mentions to store the pens horizontally when you're not using them, so don't forget to rotate the box when putting it away. The thinnest line I could make with this exact marker, since some are explosively juicy and others not, was 0.5 to 1 millimeters thin, and the thickest line I could make was half a centimeter thick. I wanted to test how well these markers layered, especially light over dark colors. Quick note, the pigment doesn't rub off much. You can barely see any dark pigments on my finger. In this little test, it does look like the markers layer well, but oh my god, wait, this is when I realized the marker slightly exploded on me. Luckily, it comes off hard, smooth surfaces if you scratch it off, but you got to scratch. Anyways, when I was drawing, I found out that they can layer, but to a certain extent, and I'll talk about this more later. This is the Arrtx sketchbook. The paper is 180 GSM, so it's a pretty good medium thickness. I've read Amazon reviews that the pages easily fall out, but I haven't had this problem yet. I actually took one page out to make the swatch sheets, and it required a good tug to rip the page out. This is a rough draft for today's drawing. I didn't include the sketching portion because this is a coloring marker review video, but if you want to see more drawing videos from start to finish, let me know in the comments. I also quickly traced my rough draft and tested out the colors. I used regular printer paper. I layered a lot, and it didn't bleed through. I was actually really surprised about this. The printer paper survived. After painting one layer of the yellowy colors, you can still see my red lines through it. This is the reason why I used a color pencil to line my drawing instead of using a regular black pencil. Most of the markers are not 100% opaque and require multiple layers, so the more layers I paint, the less I see what's underneath. I saw this smart technique from another YouTuber who also made a review video, and I'll link that below as well. After applying the paint while it's still wet, I used a damp paintbrush to blend it out. If you use too much water, the paint will become more diluted and spread more, so this is good if you want a light coat of a color on top of another color. So for an example, and I did this later on when coloring Anya's skin, if I wanted a shade between marker 2 and marker 21, I would lightly layer marker 21 on top to slightly pigment it. I learned that generally I like the paintbrush to not be that wet for better blending methods and less water paper damage. This is one layer of a marker that I think is kind of dry. You can see that the layer isn't consistent with blotches of paint. For many markers like this, I had to layer it 2 to 3 times for it to not look patchy. While I'm editing this right now, I used a blue marker to test something out, and I considered this blue marker more on the juicier side, and when I made one stroke, it was so dry, I was genuinely worried. It was so dry that it had a hard time going across a page. It was making skid mark sounds. But after I put the cap back on, I shook the marker and used it again, a lot more ink was flowing out. So I guess the solution is to just shake. This red marker is more on the juicy side, and this is what one layer looks like. It's pretty good coverage, and I only layered it one more time just to get 100% solid. There's definitely some markers in this set that are like way more juicy than that red marker, and for those markers, you only need one layer. Oh, and here's my big head 2 inches away from the paper. Precision. I would have rated this marker set a lot higher than I actually did if most of the markers was like that red marker, where one layer is good enough and you don't have to put a second layer. But most of the markers in the set was actually more on the drier end. I discovered that dabbing a damp brush onto the marker tip, then painting it on paper is a good technique as well. This and the other method is good for different uses, and I ended up using both. Something that I tried to do was to jump around and color different parts of the drawing at the same time instead of coloring each thing or character at once, just to save time because I have to wait for the paint to dry anyways. Darker colors can easily layer on top of light colors, but layering lighter colors on darker colors works well to a certain point. The markers are not 100% opaque, at least for some of the colors, and sometimes the top color will have a tint of the color underneath. On the left, I drew 2 layers using marker 44, and on the right, I drew 2 layers of the dark blue, marker 38, then 5 layers using marker 44. As you can see, no matter how many layers, it won't match the color to the left with the white background. Speaking of layering, you can basically layer these as much as you want, as long as you wait for the paint to completely dry before applying the next layer. When I was doing my color test on printer paper, I layered so many times, and the printer paper stayed alive. I saw a comment on another review video that said if the markers are dry, dip the brush tip in hot water, then close the cap and shake, and apparently that helps. I tried that, and it made the markers even more dry. I kind of freaked out a little bit. So I think I'm just gonna shake the marker because that's been working out for me. I made a mistake. I painted red where the white was supposed to be. That's a big mistake. I ended up using 3 layers of white on top. It didn't become pure white, so I drew a little bit of red on the other parts that are also supposed to be white on his hat, and then layered white so it matched. These markers can be very lenient on mistakes because they can layer well, but it is to an extent. Okay, so I literally had one job, and it was to record my drawing process, and apparently I did not record fixing Frankie's hair. So let's talk about that instead. And on the left side is a mini demonstration of how I blend with these markers. So for Frankie's hair, I wanted the color yellow from the umbrella to reflect onto his hair. First, I tried blending yellow on blue, but then the color looked bad. Since blue and yellow make green, I then layered and blended green on top, but this also looked bad. So then I took a transition color, which is a color between green and blue. So in this case, I used light blue and blended that in between, which made the blending way more gradual and smoother. Oh, also another thing to note, the markers don't smell bad or strong compared to alcohol-based markers. I literally had to put the brush tip on my nose to smell the scent. So if you're sensitive to smell, I think these markers passed the test. My mom approves too. I want to mention this is the first time I'm using markers to draw. I'm a digital artist but started out traditional using paints and color pencil, and I've always wanted to draw with markers, and with the recent hype about Arrtx Acrylic Markers, I got super excited to try these out. Since I've used acrylic paint before, these markers are basically that but in marker form, so I was kind of familiar with the medium. Not really, but kinda. At first, I thought it was convenient that I didn't have to set up a water cup and brushes, but then I eventually did because I wanted to try and blend the markers. It's still a lot easier than painting, although it does have limitations compared to using just straight up acrylic paint. Also, I want to quickly talk about what I'm drawing. If you don't know who these characters are, Frankie is the one drinking the pink martini. The cute reindeer looking at Frankie and is like, oh my gosh, is Chopper. And the dragon is Momo, and they're from One Piece. The girl farting is Anya from Spy Family. Frankie, he's a cyborg and runs on Coca-Cola as fuel, but whenever he drinks any other beverage, his personality and outfit changes. Like in one episode, he drank tea and he became a gentleman wearing half a tux because he always wears a Speedo. So I was like, what if he drank a pink martini? So I drew him being all girly pop sitting under the umbrella on a nice beachy day. Momo on top of the umbrella is trying to drink some pink martini too, and Chopper is looking at Frankie like, oh my god, it's so cool. He always does that to Frankie's new inventions and stuff. And then there's Anya. Okay, hear me out. So Frankie has this move in the anime called coup de bout, where he flies off from the projection of his farts. Okay? And so spoiler, if you haven't watched Spy Family Code White the movie, Anya does something similar. So I was like, why not just draw Anya dressing like a mini Frankie while doing the coup de bout? I'm using Faber-Castell color pencils to line this, and I do have to use more pressure down on the paper to get the color to show. I noticed that it did make indents that's visible in the back of the paper, so I don't know if I'd want to draw something on the back of this page since there's bumps and indents. A huge reason why I love Faber-Castells is because I can erase them using an eraser. Speaking of lining with color pencils, when I'm lining this, my usual strategy is to first line it with a darker shade of whatever you're lining around. Then I keep layering on top with darker shades, eventually lining only some parts with black colored pencil. I didn't use Arrtx markers to line because I wasn't confident in making super thin lines, and if I used black and I messed up, I know the markers aren't opaque enough to cover that up. Also, some markers are more juicy and other markers are super dry, and so it's really hard to make thin lines with super dry or super juicy markers. Maybe next time I'll play around with marker line art though. Taking off the washi tape is the best, most satisfying part in this whole drawing process. But the tape did peel the paper even when I was extra gentle. Especially on the left side, you can see that I tore the paper a little bit. Do y'all have any tips to prevent this? Should I not use washi tape, or should I just touch the sticky part many times to not make it sticky before putting it on paper? Let me know if you guys have any tips or ideas. Also, because I used water with the paintbrush when blending, it did slightly bend the paper. The Arrtx sketchbook is 180 GSM, so it's pretty thick and nice, but it's not super thick. I think paper made for watercolor is a lot more thicker than this, so a little bit of water did deform it. The paper did absorb the water pretty quickly compared to printer paper, but it still warped the paper. But overall, I did think it handled the water well. Just something I like to add. One more thing, the markers does not bleed through the paper. You literally can't see anything on the back unless you shine a light behind it. Then you see everything. How long do these markers last, you may ask? I can't answer this because I literally just got them, but I'm having so much fun drawing with these markers, so I'm going to keep filling up the sketchbook. If you would like to see more videos of me drawing with these markers in the sketchbook, let me know. Like and comment below. I can update you guys in the long run on how these markers are. But am I happy with these markers? Yes! And it makes me so excited to keep drawing. So personally, I would rate them an 8 out of 10. And here's a quick pros and cons list for y'all. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.